Hello everyone, welcome to The Coop. My name's Fowl Gaming and welcome to a slightly different video for The Coop. So firstly, let me start by introducing what this video is going to be. It's going to be me building a PC. So that is something completely off topic of my channel. It's not me playing any games, it's just simply a build. You might ask, why am I recording this then? Well, the answer is in a couple of parts. Firstly, I fancy doing it. Why not, eh? But secondly, I know there's quite a few members of my community that have never built a PC and might find it quite useful to watch me build one. And secondly, the person who this PC is for would also find some enjoyment in watching their PC being built. So let's get straight into it. Firstly, a big shout out to the person I'm building this PC for, Noah. He is the son of an old friend of mine called Barry. Hello to his son Elliot as well. Hope you guys are all doing well. So yeah, we're going to be building a PC today. Now, because I am building a PC, I'm not doing it in my normal gaming room because there's not enough space in there, so therefore I've had to forego my usual lighting and mic setup that you guys see in my other videos. So I am literally just recording this video using my Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, so hopefully the audio and visual quality is quite good. Also, I'm in my lounge, so hopefully it's all alright. So let's start by having a look at the actual build that we're going to complete. So here is the build that we are looking to do. I'm just going to run through it really quickly. We have got a, I don't even know the full name. I'm pretty sure it's called a SIT. I'm not sure if it's SIT or CIT. Raider RGB case with a lovely panel on the side. We have got for motherboard the MSI B450M Pro M2 Max ATX boards. For CPU, if I come over here, we've gone for the Ryzen 3 3100. We'll talk about why I've chosen that shortly. For RAM, whilst it's here, we've got the Vengeance LPX DDR4 RAM, two 8GB sticks, making a total of 16GB at 3200 megahertz. Power supply, we've gone for the FX Pro 600, again from the company SIT or CIT, not sure what to call them. And lastly, the graphics card, we've gone for the MSI GTX 1660 Super. And for storage, we've gone for simply a 1 terabyte solid state drive, just keeping it simple with one drive. So let's talk about why I've chosen this particular build before we get started. So the budget for Noah's PC was around 700 UK pounds. And I was told that they already had a mouse and keyboard, so I did not have to include that in the price, as well as they already had Elliot's old CPU, a Ryzen 1300X, so the first generation Ryzen 3, but top of the end of a Ryzen 3 chip. So initially I thought I could possibly get some better items as I wasn't going to have to be buying a CPU. But the issue I ran into when I was doing my initial research is bottlenecking. So for those who don't know what bottlenecking is in PC terms, if you think of your CPU as the brain of a computer, it's the thing doing all the major processes, and your GPU is kind of like the muscle of the PC when it comes to graphics. It's called the graphics card. Now, a CPU can only obviously handle so many processes at one time. It can only do so much, and obviously the better CPU you get, the more it can handle. Now, the games that Noah wanted to play at the sort of resolution and frames per second he wanted to get meant that I had to buy a certain level of graphics card. And that graphics card is obviously a certain capacity. And the CPU that they've currently got for him, the one they were going to use, the Ryzen 1300X, can only process a certain amount at a time. So essentially, if I was to pair up the graphics card that I wanted to use in this build with the CPU that they had, it would mean that the graphics card would only be able to get used for a certain percentage. Now, there is a lovely calculator that you guys can all do at home. I've put the link below in the description of where you can put in the PC parts that you've got, and it will calculate the estimated bottleneck percentage, aka the amount of your GPU that basically is going to waste because it can never be used. Ideally, you want something under 5%. Because you want to get the most out of your graphics card. Now, when I put the graphics card that I'm using against the 1300X that they had spare, there was going to be about 20 to 25% bottleneck, meaning that essentially 25% of the graphics card is useless. So that is not what we wanted. So it did mean that I've opted to go for the Ryzen 3 3100. So it's essentially it's the same CPU, but it's the Ryzen third generation on the Zen 2 architecture. He has also got improved speed. So, you know, this CPU is around 30% better than the CPU he's got now. So he is going to see a major increase anyway from that. But on top of that, it means that the bottleneck is down to 2%, meaning he's going to get the most out of his GPU. Okay, let's get into the building. Now, I should mention that I'm not exactly a master PC builder, so if you're watching this and you built umpteen PCs, you're gonna see better PC builds, but I've built enough PCs in my time that I know what I'm doing. I am gonna talk through the process as I do it, so for those that have never built a PC before or maybe looking to swap out a few parts, a few little hints and tips will come your way. But otherwise, guys, it's just gonna be me building a PC. I'll skip any bits that are quite long or quite fiddly, because this is probably gonna take me best part of 3 hours, give or take, maybe less. When it comes to cable management as well, and you don't want to watch that full video, so I'll be skipping out the best parts. I'll be skipping out the boring parts. So let's get started. To begin with, let's do the unboxing. That's always the fun bit. It feels like Christmas. So the first thing I'm actually going to unbox is the motherboard. You might think you'd start with the case, and in all fairness, when it comes to PC builds, you can start with whatever you want, but I'm going to start with the motherboard because before putting this into the case, which will be one of the first things you do, it's easier to actually install some of the modules onto the motherboard before it's in the case. So let's go ahead and unbox this. It's always the nice part. Motherboards are normally quite basic when it comes to what you get in here. There's the motherboard actually, then I'm going to set that down carefully. It comes with a nice MSI badge. I'll keep that separate in case, it might be, is that a fridge magnet? Yeah, it's slightly magnetic, so no, when I give you this, you can actually put this on your PC case if you want to. I've also got some drivers, but I'll be downloading those online anyway. Some startup books, thank you notes, and a quick installation guide, which I don't need because I know what I'm doing. It'll be funny if I end up not doing it correctly. Cool, and we'll get rid of the box. Now, let's take the cardboard off of here. Oh, and we also did notice that came with it. We got the I/O board. So this is what goes on the back of the PC to make sure the ports are basically the correct holes for the correct ports, and a couple of SATA cables. I've got plenty of these spare if we need more. Put those to one side for now. Okay, so we are going to unwrap this. So notice that this packaging that motherboards and generally PC components are in, these are basically to protect it from static electricity. Now, static electricity is a massive potential issue with PC parts. You must be very careful to make sure you have got no static electricity touching the boards. The best thing to do is touch a piece of metal. So I've got some metal behind me. I've got my oven. I'm always going to touch something metal before loading up a new part. Or touching a new part, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally short circuit any of your parts. Now, there you go. You don't have to break the bag. It's just a nice little thing here. Just going to slide this on out. Okay. Now, it's got to be very careful with these as well. You'll notice on the back of any motherboard, obviously you've got lots of bits of solder. Ideally, you want to lay down your motherboard onto a flat, non-metallic surface when you put any parts. Okay, hopefully this is a slightly better angle for you. So like I said, the first thing we're going to install is the CPU, as that's nice, quick, and easy to install. You still have to make sure you get it right. However, it's something that isn't too tough. So to begin with, let's put the motherboard to one side and unbox the lovely Ryzen 3 CPU. Obviously, it's going to have a tamper seal to make sure it's not been tampered with. I'll use my trusty scissors to open this up. In hindsight, a knife would have been better, but oh well. There we go. So you don't normally get too much in here, but because this is the certain model of Ryzen 3, it does come with its own CPU cooler. We are going to opt to stick with the stock cooler to try and keep this build a bit cheaper. There's nothing wrong with the stock cooler. If you look on reviews online, a lot of people say to upgrade the stock cooler. I've personally been running the stock cooler on my Ryzen 5 3600X. I stream, play games, render videos, and I've had no issues. It's never gone over 60 degrees temperature. So I personally don't think that we really need to upgrade it for this build. However, if it's something that the Noah wants to do in the future, that's fine. So here we go. Here is the CPU. It always comes in this lovely little packaging. Now, one thing you always want to do when you get a new CPU is check for bent pins. Now, because of how good the packaging is, normally this doesn't happen. But if you've got a bent pin, you want to notice it now so that you can send it back. A bent pin is normally a dead CPU. So we're going to very carefully just hold it at the sides, pick it up, and take a look. I'm going to hold this as close to the camera as I can, and you're going to look down it and just see if there's any bent CPUs. And I'm going to just do this myself. Now we're looking good. Okay, so one thing you want to know about the CPU is in one corner it's going to have a little arrow, and on the other side as well, if I lift it around very carefully, you'll notice there's also an arrow, very tiny, on this bit here. That's going to come into note when we install the CPU. So most modern motherboards will have this. In fact, I'm just going to put this very carefully to one side. Most motherboards you will see at the socket will have this little arm here. If you just unclick it with your fingernail, that is now unlocked. All we need to do with the CPU, this is actually really easy to install, is put the CPU into that socket and close this little hatch. Now you've got to be really careful. If you notice in that board, the top right corner, I'm not sure if it'll come into focus, you'll notice there's also a little arrow. It's very important that you simply match the arrows. So the little arrow for me is there and there. I'm just going to place this neatly in, being gentle with it. You do not need to actually apply any force. The weight of the CPU by itself will simply fall into place. You don't need to push it in. There's no clicking. It literally just falls in. You can see I can even like lift up if I wanted to. So I'm just going to snap this back down nice and gently. And that is the CPU locked in. Very easy part to do. So next we're going to have a look at the cooler. So let's again pop our motherboard to one side and unpack our lovely CPU cooler. So this is the one that comes bog standard with the Ryzen 3. Sorry, that was probably not the nicest of sounds. I appreciate that. So here we go. Here is the stock cooler. As you can see, it is relatively simple. It is not RGB. It is just a simple metal contact with a single fan. For the build that Noah is going to be running, this is going to be absolutely fine. If he was to have a bigger graphics card, a bigger CPU, or if he was going to be overclocking, he might want a different one. But for now, this will be absolutely fine. Notice that most stock coolers will come pre-installed with thermal paste. Look at that. That's looking absolutely lovely and pasted up. Means I haven't got to apply thermal paste, which is another thing that can go wrong with CPUs. Now, you'll notice that this CPU cooler has 4 spring-loaded screws to attach to the motherboard. My motherboard is already pre-installed with clips because you have 2 types of CPU fans. Some that clip on, some that screw on. Now what that means is I'm going to have to very carefully put this CPU CPU cooler to one side, and I'm going to have to unscrew these clips to take them off. So therefore the CPU cooler can just screw straight in. So I'm going to quickly do that now. And you'll see here that after taking 2 off, this simply just comes straight off. I'll put it to one side because I'll keep it. These I will, once again, leave with Noah because if he wants to install a different CPU cooler later on that is clipped, he'll want these. Notice that we have where it's screwed into. This is the back plate. We will be leaving that in. Let's get the other side off. There we are. Both of those are now off. I'm going to pop those to one side. I will put them somewhere in a neat bag so I don't lose them later. It's very careful that you make sure you know where all your screws are because it's very easy to get lost. Okay, so if I just pick this up, you'll actually notice the back plate, I should say, is going to remain there. This is the back plate for the CPU. This is to make sure that the back of the motherboard does not short out against any other metal that it may end up touching. Notice that the rubber sealant there. So what I now need to do is leave that in place there. And what I'm going to do is get the new CPU cooler, place it on top, and simply screw it in. Now, one thing I'm going to make note of is because this is a direct-on fan, I don't have to worry about which direction it's pointing. You know, it's going to point up. But I've got one of 2 ways to place it, either that way or that way. Now, personally, I know that the RAM sticks are going to be here because of where the RAM stick spots are. And because of this little lump from the CPU fan here, I don't really want to place it that way round because it might get in the way of the RAM sticks. So I'm going to place it this way round. This is the biggest issue with building PCs. It's get it right first time so that you haven't got to start unscrewing things and you'll have no issues. Also, the CPU fan connector is up here. So this will be quite nice for our cable management. because it's going to be nice and easy to tuck away. So I want to try and get this right first time, because ideally you don't want to be messing around with pulling a CPU cooler off, because then you're going to start losing the thermal paste and you won't be able to build the PC without getting more thermal paste. So I'm going to very lightly tuck this down, and with my screwdriver in a moment, with each of these screws I'm going to do just a half turn so that I get an even amount of pressure with the CPU cooler actually on. Once I've confirmed that it's on, I will then tighten them each up until the point I get resistance and then stop there. So I'm just going to go quiet whilst I do this. I'm going to place it down neatly over where the screw holes are. What's quite nice is they fall in a little bit naturally, so that is now sitting on. I'm going to very carefully do a half turn for each one, whilst applying just a tiny bit of pressure, because these are spring-loaded screws. So if you don't apply pressure, they might not actually go in. Get this cable out of the way. Okay, so I'm just going to double check. And I can tell that's in because I'm giving it a light lifting pressure and nothing's coming off. So now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and tighten these screws now, up until the point that I get a slight bit of resistance. And there we go. And just like that, the CPU cooler is on. I'm just going to double check underneath just to make sure no thermal paste has leaked. And no, we are looking good. So next thing is to plug it in. This is the 4-pin connector for the CPU fan. Now, what's quite nice about motherboards is it looks confusing, but actually, if you look at it, all of the pins are labeled. Now, can you see that one up? If I turn it this way, you'll see it better. There's one up there that says CPU fan 1. It's hard to point out at what's holding the board, but there is one there that says it's just behind this cable, CPU fan 1. So all I'm going to do is take this cable, just make sure I plug it the right way around, which is that way. It just, it won't fit otherwise. Now these metal pins can be quite delicate, so you have got to apply a tiny bit of pressure, but you don't want to do it too much. And what's quite nice is that cable will tuck in quite nicely there between the RAM. And that's exactly what we're going to install next, so let's unpack the RAM. Let's put the motherboard to one side. RAM is quite a small box. This is probably, I would argue, this is the easiest thing to install. The easiest thing to upgrade as well, should you ever want more RAM. However, for this particular build, 16 gigabytes of this speed is going to be more than enough. You also get some extra stickers in the box, I'm pretty certain. Sometimes you do. Nope, not this one. There's some safety information. We'll get rid of those, because who needs safety information? Nice little, once again, plastered packaging that just lifts off. Okay, so installing RAM is pretty easy. One thing you do need to keep in consideration is how many slots you've got for your RAM. You'll notice this motherboard has 2 slots, which makes this very, very easy for me. If you ever have a motherboard that has 4 slots, you've got to consider dual channel and single channel. I'm not going to go into that now because it's not needed. So to install the RAM, you'll notice that these RAM slots have these little arms. If I just give a bit of pressure on each one, I can open them up. You'll hear a satisfying click. Okay, maybe no click when opening them up. And I'm going to open up this one as well. What you need to do when you install RAM is have a look. There's always a long side and a short side. So this is the long side here between my 2 thumbs, and this is the short side. You'll notice on the motherboard, the short side is at the bottom. So I need to make sure the RAM stick is that way round. And then all you simply do is, I'm just going to move this cable to one side carefully, is slot it in. It will initially go in quite easily, but that's not in. You then have to apply even pressure. Now, when you apply this pressure, it's best to do it at the corners because that is where it is clipping in. Now, you're going to see that it's going to actually take quite a bit of pressure. This motherboard is flexible. It's not going to snap. Don't feel like you're going to break it, but just light pressure. Don't go all in. Just a little bit extra pressure until it eventually clicks. There we go. Both sides are clipped in. That's now steady. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. Again, making sure that I've lined it up correctly. Slot it in to begin with. There you go, it's in. But I'm now going to do light pressure, doing a little bit more pressure at a time until eventually it fully clicks. There we go. That is the RAM installed, nice and easy. If you ever want to change your RAM, it's as simple as unclicking the 2 arms. You can lift it out, place the new RAM in, and again, just click it in. Really easy to change RAM. Okay, so you might be thinking, oh, next is going to be the graphics card. That's attached to here. However, graphics cards can be very heavy, and it's not something you want to install just yet. So now, we have our motherboard completed as much as I want to. We are now going to have a look at opening up the case and getting some stuff installed in there. Be right back. Alright, so the next portion of this video is going to be in this top-down view, because it's going to be the best way to see the case. Mainly because the desk I was using isn't big enough and I couldn't get a decent camera angle. Now, you can see what I have done is I've placed down cardboard, because ideally, if you don't have space at home to lay a PC down to do this at home, you are going to not want to lay it on the carpet, because obviously static electricity is thriving there. So again, I've placed it on a box, just to get rid of the static electricity. And again, I'm always going to make sure I touch the metal myself. You know, right now I haven't put any components in it, but when there is components in it, I'm always going to make sure I touch metal first to destatic. So first things first with the case, we need to actually take off the lovely panel side. Now these are actually thumb screws, although you can do it, well, they're quite short thumb screws. Wow, they are really, really short. But you know, they hold it in. I'm going to put those to one side carefully. I said carefully. And we're going to remove the side panel, which is tempered glass. It's still got its lovely plastic sheeting on it. And I'm going to put that neatly to one side where it's not going to be broken. And there we go. So let's look at what you get inside the case. This is the first time I've opened it up. So to begin with, I've got something that is tied here. Let's untie this. It's just tied on with a plastic clip. A nice little Ziploc bag. I'll probably keep this to give to Noah with any other spare bits. So inside here we've got the following. We have got a controller. Now this is likely going to be the controlling box that we're going to install in the back for the RGB fans. So we'll be coming back to this later. In this bag we've also got... okay, these are all the screws that we'll have. So these are the mounting screws for the motherboard and a few thumb screws for GPUs and stuff like that. So we're going to keep that safe to one side. And looks like they've also supplied us with a couple of zip ties, which is really, really nice for cable management later on. Cool, that's nice. We've also got in here a random post-it note. Coop Egg 7982. Interesting, not sure what that's for. Cool. And as you can see, the case has become pre-installed with 3 front fans and 1 rear-facing fan. So it's nice that we're not going to have to install those. But obviously they are still there. You can also see these cables starting up here. These are for the top buttons of the case. It's not the best case in the world. There are exposed wires. There's not really, you know, it'd be nice if we could cable management these away, but they'll still be out of the way for what we've got. And you can see these cables running down here, as what will happen is they'll come up through these holes that will be around here to go into the motherboard. So there are a couple of ways you can do this when it comes to installing the case. You've got the power supply that's going to fit down here. You've got hard drives that are going to fit here and here. You've got the motherboard, which will fit here. And a graphics card that will slip in at the end. Now we're going to do the graphics card at the end because that involves the motherboard being in. Really, we have a choice. We can put in the motherboard first, or we can put in the power supply first. Personally, I'm going to put in the power supply first, as I feel like it's the easiest thing to get out of the way. So that's what we're going to do. Now to begin with, I need to go find it and unbox it. Okay, let's unpack the power supply unit. You'll see I've put the screws that we had before into a bowl. Always a good idea to do, not just for PC building, but just any DIYing. Now I've already opened the box. Inside has come, again, some cable ties and a couple of screws. Always nice of them to give some cable ties. They'll come in handy. We've got a user manual. Don't need that. Okay, so this is a modular power supply unit. So what modular means is that a lot of them can be changed. But to be honest, we're probably going to be using the majority of them anyway. So you can see here, it's another SIT brand. And you can see a lovely big fan on there, which is always great for your power supply unit. It's quite a chunky boy. And you can see the whole host of cables that come out of it. So give me a second, chat. I don't know why I said chat. See, I'm too used to Twitch streaming. Give me a second to untangle these and get them out. And we'll talk through what we've got and what we're going to use. Okay, so now time to install the PSU into the case. So first things first, I'm going to put the PSU to one side, because what we need to do to get it in, now this isn't the same for every case, but it is for this one. You'll notice that if I wanted to install the PSU, it's going to fit in this space here. It doesn't just slot in here and it can't slot in the back. The only way to get it in is to get into the back panel. So to get the back panel off, it's some more screws, although these ones are a little bit tighter, so I will actually have to use my screwdriver rather than the thumb screws. And this you've got a little latch here. You can just pull it off. There you go, nice and neat. This is nicely spaced so that it's not going to short out the motherboard. That's what this bit's for. Put that to one side. And now we can see inside of the PC case. If I just lean it up there, but you know, if I just push this down, there you go. We're now looking at the back of the case. We will be back here later when it comes to cable management. But for now, what we're going to do is slot this in. So, to begin with, which way are you going to slot it in? Now, the cables are always going to be facing towards the front of the PC. You're not going to have your cables going out the back of the PC. That would be silly unless you're going for a joke build. And on top of that, whether it's this way round or that way round, you want to look at the fan. The fan will almost always be facing down. So right now, this is the bottom of the PC. You'll notice here, I'm not going to zoom in, but there's a nice little vent here where it's going to draw in air, So we can nicely slot this in here. Now, it's not going to just stay in there by itself. We are going to have to screw it in. There are 4 screw holes back here. I can't actually show you without moving the camera, but there are simply, if I pull this back out, there are 4 screw holes that are going to line up neatly with the 4 back here. It's kind of industry standard where these holes are. So if I get my screwdriver and the screws that came with it, which were somewhere around here, and we'll screw it in. There we go, the PSU is now neatly into the board. Now I'm going to leave the cables coming out this side as we're going to do some cable management later. But for now, what I'm going to do is flip it over and put the motherboard in. And then we start plugging things in. Okay, so now we're back. We've got the motherboard down there. Looks tiny in comparison to the compared to the case, admittedly. It is a relatively small ATX board. We could have gone for bigger, but for what he needs, it'll be absolutely fine. So the first thing we need to install is actually the IO board. This is the board that will attach bottom left there to actually make sure that the connectors come out of the back of the PC properly. So what we can do is carefully turn the PC up onto its front for a second. You can see the cutout here for the I/O. Now normally, so it's going to be that way round. There you go, got there eventually. You obviously the text is the right way up. We can slot this in, make sure that this cable is out of the way. This will normally go in with a bit of a press. So you basically get it there and you give it a bit of a push. Now you've got to be really careful. This metal is often very, very flimsy. Even on more expensive brands, it is quite flimsy. All right, we're gonna try this IO board again. So there we go. Pop it in. We've got it the right way up. Gonna pop it in this side. Again, being gentle with it where I can. There you go. You can hear a nice satisfying click. And there we go, that is in much better. Okay, so now we're going to install the actual motherboard itself. So there we go. Now, you can see where we're going to install the motherboard by these golden riser screws that are already there. Those are to rise the motherboard slightly away from this back plate and preventing it from shorting. You'll see as well that in this case, and most cases, there are extra slots here. That's because most cases like this one will come with spare riser screws, which you can place if you're going to have a wider motherboard. So if you're ever going to upgrade the motherboard, you can use these screws. Keep these safe. Do not think they are spares for no reason. Make sure you keep these safe when you buy a new case or motherboard, because you want to make sure that they are there if you need to. So the ones that we need are already in there because this is a relatively small board that we're putting in, and I'm going to simply put it in. Now what you're going to see me do is I'm going to lower the board in. I'm going to slot it in left so that it goes into the IO screen that I had over here, line them up over the holes, find the screws, and then screw them in. I'm going to have to lift up this cable as I do it as well. Let's have a go. Right, so I'm now going to take 2, again, lower it in carefully, line it up with the board, to get rid of this cable again. This is the bit that feels like surgery, to be honest, is getting in this motherboard. There we go. That is on, and I can see this is nicely lined up with not all of the screws. So you can see here as well, zooming in, that by placing that down, I looked and it's this hole here and this hole here that is the length of my board. So what I'm going to do is take these extra thumb screws that I've got. I'm going to leave in the 2 that are there anyway, and I'm going to install these ones into here to make sure that I've got the right size board in. Now these are thumb screws, so you've got to do it just by yourself. They are a little bit tight, admittedly. I might have to get my pliers, to be honest, to make sure they're in properly. Yeah, I'm going to have to get some pliers. Okay, so that was my first real problem with building this PC. When you build PCs, that you're always going to run into some sort of problem. And what I found out was that the two pre-drilled holes that were here for these two golden riser screws weren't, the actual pre-drilled hole wasn't wide enough to fit in. So I couldn't use my hand to turn these in. So what I had to do was I had to attach the screw that eventually goes into them into that metal riser, then screw it into the board, which then, thanks to me using the screwdriver and a bit of torque, was able to open up the pre-drilled hole a little bit more so it actually goes in. I then had to unscrew it, take out the bolt, and then I could hand turn it in. Either way, one problem resolved. We now have the correct mounts in there for this board, so we can go take number 3 of putting in this motherboard. So let's have another go. PC building is fun, but it is very much problem solving at times. Okay, this time round, I can see that we have... Oh, hold on. Have I? Ha 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 ha! Again, chat. Hindsight is 2020. I really should have paid more attention the first time I put this in, because that screw is right, but this one needs to be there. Stand by. And just like magic, boom, I've now moved the holes. Again, PC building is fun, it can be problem building. So, lucky, number 3 or 3rd time now, that I'm going to try and pop in this motherboard. So again, we're just going to line it up, make sure that I/O goes in, which it does. And now this time, I can see all of the contacts line up, which is fantastic. So, now we go for the screws that come with the case. And we got a total of 6 screws to pop in. And I'm going to start with the top left one, because this one is always annoying to get into, purely due to the space it is. Just like before, I'm not going to tighten these fully. I'm just going to make sure they have started to thread, and then at that point I will stop turning, because what commonly happens is you might find that one of the holes might not line up as well as the others, and you might have to kind of shift the board around a little bit. So the last thing you want to do is tighten up all of the screws, just to find that you have to untighten them all again. Like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to PC building, the most annoying part is you need to get it right first time. If you don't get it right first time, you end up having to backtrack quite a lot. I got quite lucky with the whole motherboard issue, that all I had to do was just lift it out. You know, it wasn't like I was screwing it in every time. That could have been an issue I found. I might have screwed in these top ones only to realise the bottom ones weren't lining up. So it was good that I was checking that before. Okay, there we go. That is one motherboard installed. It is quite a small motherboard, but it's absolutely fine. It does the job. Okay, with the motherboard installed, we can now start installing. There's one other part I want to put in, and that is the SD card into here. Not the SD card, sorry, the SSD. Once that is done, apart from the graphics card, all of the parts are in the PC. All I have to do at that point is start doing the wires. So let me go unbox the SSD and we'll pop that in. Bam, one SSD in. I didn't show that on video because, I'll be honest, to do it I had to stand the case up, and I wouldn't have got a good camera angle without moving all of this around. But basically, there is the SSD in. It's as simple as there are 4 screws on the other side that go in. I had 2 choices of where to place the SSD. I could have placed it up here or down here. Now I've placed it down here for one main reason. The power cables are going to be coming up here. If I'd have put it up there, the cables would have got mixed in with these too much. It's going to be better for cabling here, especially as the cables only need to go to there. So rather than having to stretch a cable all the way up, we've done it this way instead. Okay, with that now in, we can start to actually wire it. So let's move the camera angle a little bit and start doing that. Okay, so we've moved back to my desk up here because it's going to be easier for you guys to see. And we're going to start plugging in the cables. Now, that you could do the cables in any particular order, although I'd recommend doing the actual power cables last, just to be safe. I'm going to start by connecting the cables that have already been pre-installed up here, remember they were down underneath. We're going to plug them into the motherboard. Now, if you are new to plugging in these boards, you are going to have to check your motherboard's manual, as it kind of tells you where to plug things in. So first things first, I'm going to get these cables that I put down here before, and I'm going to bring them up through this little handy gap in the box, as normally the place where they have it. I'm going to bring all these cables back through, as I did earlier. There we go. You can see them being tightened up here. I don't want to pull them too tight because I don't want them to pull through. Okay, and I'm also going to uncable tie them. They were cable tied before, but some of them go in different places, so we want to get it right. And I'm also going to zoom you in a little bit so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing here. So some of them are pretty easy. They are normally labeled. For example, this one, the blue one, is for your USB 3. For those who haven't seen, USB 3 is always blue on the inside. It's a nice little blue here. It even says on the thing there, USB 3. And if I look on the motherboard, it's normally around there. It says, if I zoom in, you may, if I'm lucky, be able to see it. If I just put this up a little bit. It does say just there, USB 3. So I'm just going to untie this from the others just so that it's not in the way. And I'm going to neatly turn it around and plug it in with a bit of leveraging. A nice satisfying click. That cable is in. We'll do cable management shortly. So next thing, let's do the easy ones first. We have got, again, most of these are labeled. You can see this is for another USB. And I can see there are 2 USB slots here. You can see it says USB on them. So again, I'm just going to line up. Notice that in this, sorry for the camera angle, notice there is one bit that hasn't got, one corner that hasn't got a pin, and there's also one corner down here that hasn't got a pin. So that is how you know which way to plug it in. And again, with a little bit of force, these will just slot right in. There's no satisfying click for that one, unfortunately. Now, don't be afraid if the motherboard bends a little bit whilst you're doing this. That will happen, as long as, you know, you don't, if you're using too much pressure, then there might be an issue. So those are for the 2 USBs up there. We now have another one. Again, it is labeled, sorry, I know the camera angle is really bad, HD audio. And again, there is normally HD audio written on there. If you can't see it, which I cannot, I'm going to just refer to the manual quickly. Okay, so from the manual, it's the one right in this corner of your screen. So I'm going to make sure I'm considering where the cables are as I do this to make sure that I do not put the cables in a position that are going to be difficult to cable tie. The last thing I want to have to do is unplug them all to then get it right. Again, a little bit of persuasion, and that's in quite nicely. These cables are quite tight. That is something to notice. All right, so all that's left of these cables, if I put them to one, if I kind of get them out, are these tiny ones. These ones are always fun to install. I would probably argue that this is the most annoying part of a PC build to install, if you ask me, because they are just so damn fiddly, as you can probably hear and tell. So these are, thankfully they're color coded for this, but these are for the other buttons on the top of your case, like for example the power on switch, the reset button, the audio, and things like that. Well, not the audio actually, but things like the data indicator. So these are normally labeled, so there you go. So this one, for example, I know it's hard to see, but this one says power supply. This one is HD LED plus and minus. This one here is your reset switch. And then these 2 individual pronged ones, again, really annoying, are your power LED on and off. So you do need to refer to the manual in this. If I kind of show you, there is normally a picture. There we go there. So you can see this little picture here, and it tells me where I'm putting them in relation to this. This tiny little section here is what that is. So I'm going to check and line them up. There you go, there's HHD plus and minus. So what I'll do is the minus is always, again, I'm not sure if you guys can see this. I'm going to be really careful here. On here is a little tiny arrow. That indicates that is the plus. Okay, because you've got a plus and a minus. The plus is the one with the little arrow. So I'm just going to look at my sheet to which one should be the plus. It's that way. And I'm going to plug that in like this. Now, I'll say now, if a PC doesn't turn on, this is one of the first things to check, because people get these mixed around the wrong way all the time, and I wouldn't be surprised if I did one day. Okay, and then lastly, the power LEDs. That is the minus, that is the plus. There we go. And just like that, those cables are in. So now all of our cables that are attached to the top, if I just zoom out a little bit, all of our cables that go to the top are in. What I'm going to now do is push these carefully back through for purposes of nice cabling, and later on I will cable tie these together, but for now I will leave it as it is. The last thing you want to do, cable tying comes last, because you don't want to have to unplug them later when you've already cable tied them. Next thing I'm going to plug in, just because it's so easy, is the SATA cable from the SSD into the motherboard. So I believe I have one of these cables lying around. So there are always two types of, so SATA cables look like this. You can see this one has two straight edges like that. You also normally, with a PC build, will get one like this, where one of them is straight and one of them is a 90-degree bend. Now, based on what I've got here, I'm going to go with the 90-degree bend. I'm going to plug it in here. It just goes in and gives a satisfying click when it is in. Again, I'm not sure if you guys are going to hear the click, but that's nicely in for me. And I'm then going to plug this into the SATA cable. It doesn't really matter which one. In fact, you know what? For good cable management, I'm going to pass this through here. Like that. There we go. I'm going to then bring it back down and up through the bottom. I'm going to plug it into this one down here. There we go. And I can hide that cable a bit later, but there we go. That is a cable hidden. So next is going to be the power supply unit. So there are a few cables that we need to bring in. The first one, let's do the CPU power. So up here, there is a 8-pin connector to power the CPU. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the back of the PC right now. And from all those cables that you saw earlier, guys, I'm just sorting through them, just untangling them a little bit. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, guys, that gave me flashbacks to unwrapping Christmas tree lights. You can probably actually see my eyes up in this corner. This is where I'm gonna be feeding in the connector. So I've got the 8-pin connector, PCIe, that I'm going to slot through the top here. And then I'm gonna come around to this side, and I'm gonna very neatly spin it round. We're gonna do it that way, and plug it in. Gonna get a nice little satisfying click as normal. Oh, okay, that's a very, very quiet click that I heard. And there you go, nice and neat, the CPU is now powered. The next power cable we're gonna put in is the main motherboard power cable. This one here, the big 24-pin. I'm gonna bring it through this slot here. So I'm just gonna locate it behind, making sure that I'm doing this in a way that is not going to be bad for cable management later. There we go. I'm gonna bring this up through here, and again this bit is going to need to plug in there, so I'm going to bring it in the opposite way round. Actually, I'm going to go through this one here, because this is going to then not bend the cable as much. I'm going to come through here, bend it around this way, and plug it in. Again, give it a bit of force. There we go. Nice satisfying clip. That's in, and later on we will cable manage that a little bit better. All right, so that is the motherboard now powered. So we now need to power the SSD just here. So I've got a lovely cable which can do that. So I've got a single cable here that will come up and over and in, and we'll plug it in this way round. There we go. Now the SSD is powered. Again, we'll cable manage back there shortly, but that's now plugged in. Now I'm going to prepare for the graphics card later on by bringing in the power for this one. It's going to come down and around, I think. That's how we're going to power this is for the graphics card later, so I'm going to leave that to one side. Okay, technically our PC could be turned on now and theoretically would work, apart from the fact it hasn't got a graphics card in. But before we start doing all the cable management, we need to make sure we sort out the system fans. Now this case came with 2 extra fans that admittedly I could have installed whilst it was on the floor, but I'm going to install now in a moment. But we're going to talk about airflow quickly. When it comes to PCs, it's really important for cooling that you have a good airflow. When we talk about airflow, we're talking about intakes and outtakes. So these 3 fans at the front will bring air in this way. This ground fan, which is with part of the power supply unit, will bring air up. You can alternatively put 2 fans here as well, but we're not going to do that because we haven't got the extra fans. Instead, we are going to, we've got 6 fans, not 8 fans. We are going to install 2 more fans in the top. Now, ideally, we're going to use these as intakes. So we're going to bring air through. We're going to bring nice cool air through the top, through the front, and have an exhaust port at the back. Now we have got loads of perforated holes as well, so the airflow is going to be really, really nice and shoot out the back. So firstly, let's install these fans. If in doubt, by the way, if you're ever installing a fan, obviously make sure you install it the right way round so that it is an exhaust or intake. Easiest way to know which way the fan is going to spin is just simply look at any of the pre-installed fans. The one in the back is always going to be an outtake. So if you want it to be an outtake, you're going to mirror it like this. If you want it to be an intake, we're going to be putting it like that. So I'm going to install mine like that. It's just going to take me a second to do. I'll bring you back in a moment. All right, so a bit of a long pause there. I have now managed to put in the 2 top fans, but I'll be honest, it was not without difficulty. So I've figured out something that's a little bit wrong with this case. So before, we had the power supply for the CPU that came in through that top hole, and it was really nice for cable management. But the issue is, when you install that top fan, it does not give enough clearance here to be able to get the cable in and bent round. So unfortunately, what I've had to do is I've had to run the cable that powers the CPU through the front of the build. Now this isn't uncommon, I actually have this on my very own build, but it's a shame because the less wires out front, the better. Now we will be able to tuck that quite neatly behind the graphics card when it's in, but at least it is now all plugged in and we have 6 fans. So we're now going to turn the PC round and start plugging in these fans. Okay, so here is the back of the case now. As you can see, it's an absolute mess of cables. We will be tidying this up shortly. But first things first, we have now got 6 of these cables which are for the fans, and we need to connect them all together and give them some power. So for this case comes with what's called literally a box, and all of those are going to be plugged into it, and what's quite nice is this will magnetically stick to it. This also has a power cable and another cable which you can plug into the motherboard to control the speed. Now unfortunately this motherboard doesn't support that, so we are going to just carefully wind that up and put it to one side. The fans will still be able to be controlled with a box. The fans will still be able to, the fan speed can still be controlled with a controller that came with it. All this means is that you can't monitor the speed of the fans through the motherboard's internal software. But that's fine because we're not going to be touching that anyway. But just to save some time, I'm going to pause the video whilst I just plug these in. But all I'm doing is I'm plugging these individually into the box. And I'm going to do it in a way that the cables are ordered the right way that I want them. Okay, so there you go. I've now plugged in all 6 fans into here. Now, one thing to mention when you're plugging a box like this is on the back, you can see, or I'm not sure if you can see very well on the camera, that these are numbered. For example, that's port number 1, that's port number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, obviously the whole point of these RGB fans is that they're going to do, you want them to be able to do a nice flow, as if like it's, you know, like a Mexican wave of colors. That is an option that's going to be available to you. To get that right, it's very important that you plug these in the right order. So I've done it, if I zoom out a little bit, I've done it so that fan number 1 is up here, then 2, then other way around. 1 is down here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the back one will be 6, and then it'll rotate back round to 1, so that you'll be able to have a nice circular motion. If you get that wrong, then you're gonna have to replug them round, but at least that's now done. I can now stick this quite happily to the box, and now all that's left to do is to somehow tidy all of that up. I'm gonna do that now. Wish me luck. Okay, so I will show you the back of the case in a moment when we finish the cable management, but for now we're going to install the graphics card because that's going to help me finish the cable management once that's installed. So a graphics card plugs into the PCI Express port right here, and it gets screwed into the back of the board here for support because it's quite a hefty thing. Now first things first, you've got loads of slots here. You'll notice right now they've all got covers. These are actually flimsy covers that you can break. Now ideally you don't want to break them off right now because as soon as you break them off they can't go back on again. First thing you actually want to do is lift up your card and bring it to roughly where it's going to go so you can see which of the ports you're going to have to break. Now I can see from holding that up that it's going to be these 2 top ports that are going to have to break, so I can quite simply push these out, give them a little bit of a wiggle. I'm just making sure that I don't damage any capacitors on the motherboard. In fact, I'm going to wiggle out front ways if I can. And I'm going to do this as gently as I can because the last thing I want to do is damage the rest of the case. But there we go. That literally comes out. It's just a bit of thin plastic. You can see how easily the case can bend, so you've got to be really careful with these cases. I'm going to do the same thing with the one below. Again, just being as careful as I can. And there we go, out that comes. Now it's given 2 slots, which when we plug in this lovely graphics card, the GTX 1660 Super by MSI with its lovely RGB as well. It's a great graphics card. When we put this in momentarily, this is going to be the 2 slots that comes out for here. To plug in a graphics card, it is quite simple. Firstly, it will always come with a little cover for the actual bit that you need to plug in, so we take that off. And you can see how this is going to line up quite neatly and slot in. Now, what you should prepare in advance is the screws. Now, first things first, I need to take off the protective cover on the left-hand side. If I just pop down the graphics card very carefully, there is a cover to the left here that I need to take off. One moment. Okay, so what I've just taken out there is this little shield, which I can't show you without turning the case, but basically protects in this little side bit there. Now this is off. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be pushing this cable. If I let me zoom you in a little bit. Now, it's going to be hard for you to see what I'm doing without my hands getting in the way, so I'm going to explain it first. You can see there how it kind of slots in a Lego. This slot here is going to slot into this. It's got the same sort of snappy connector as the RAM did earlier, so I'm going to open that up ready to go. Once it's in, you can see on this left-hand side here, where my fingertips are, there are 2 screw holes, which I've got predetermined screws here that I'm going to screw into the side panel there. So here we go. Now the bottom of the graphics card, where it's plastic here, that is a safe place to hold. So is the top. Again, provided you have these statics yourself, it is a shield on purpose. So I'm going to very carefully put this cable in a position that is going to not get damaged. It is going to push in. There we go. I'm going to give it a bit of a shove, and you might hear the click. There we go. The graphics card is now actually plugged into the motherboard, but I'm not letting go of the weight just yet, because it's very important that we get the graphics card actually screwed in. So I'm going to now take one of these screws. I'm holding it very tightly with my left hand right now, whilst I get a screw prepared and get it in. And there we go. Graphics card is plugged in. Simply plugged in, screwed in those holes, and now if I come back, we've got a lovely PC build that now is starting to look a little bit more full. So we can now plug in the power cable for the graphics card, which we said we pre-brought through earlier. So I'm just going to plug this in here. Okay, there is the graphics card in. Now you might notice something different between those 2 scenes. There is no longer a cable up here. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I made a mistake. Don't you just love building PCs? What I did is the power connector for the CPU fan was so similar to the GPU one that it actually managed to fit in the CPU. So I plugged that in earlier, but it turns out what that was the PCIe connector. And the cable that I had here a moment ago was the one for the CPU, which wouldn't fit in here. So what I've done is I had to take the graphics card out, and I've swapped the cables around. And what's quite nice actually is the CPU cable is a bit longer. So you'll notice I have, actually been able to fit that in coming up the top. So now there is no longer a cable up there, which means cable management is going to be really nice. So there we go. Everything is now plugged in. We are ready to turn the PC on. But before we do, I'm going to quickly tidy up the cables at the back. And there we go. After about 15 minutes work, I've now managed to cable tie the back of this so that, it's not perfect, but it's out of view and it's going to stay quite nicely to the case. We're going to be able to fit the back of the case now. Now, it's good practice not to fit the back of the case until we've at least turned it on in case we need to check cables. So now the fun moment comes. I'm going to plug it all into a screen and monitor, get it set up, and we're going to see if we can boot. Let's go. Okay, so to set up the PC, I have all got it plugged in to a mouse, keyboard, my old screen, and internet. It's the dodgy setup. Normally you wouldn't have a PC on the floor like this, but fortunately I don't have anywhere so I can put it all. Here comes the moment of truth though. Everything is plugged in. Everything is turned on, ready, apart from the power button. The USB stick is in there, ready to install Windows. Let's see what we get. We have lighting. We have CPU fan turning, and the graphics card is lit up. Question is, are we going to get anything on the screen? It's looking lovely, though. I love that blue. Let's see. It's the moment of truth. Oh, we might have something on the screen. We are entering into... Okay, device has changed. Let's run with the default. Now, hopefully, it should recognize that I've got a USB stick in that has the boot for Windows, and we'll have a chance to install it. We will see. Let's see what happens. Whilst we're waiting for that, let me grab the remote so we can have a look at the RGB. One moment. And good news, we've got the Windows boot screen, so we're going to be setting that up shortly. But in the meantime, let's have a look at some of these colors. So we've got red, green. So a bit. Actually, let me turn off the lights. 1 second. All right, this is much cooler. So we got red, green, blue, yellow, different blue. I'll be honest, it's hard to see the remote now. There we go, and purple. Looks like we can do mode. Let's see if we can find we can increase the speed. And that's the speed of changing. Oh no, that's the dimness. Okay, so we can change the dimness. And there we go, RGB, gotta love it. Alright, so stupidly, I forgot to record a kind of finale to the video before I kind of packed everything away and sorted everything out ready for delivery at the weekend. But the good news is, you saw there that it booted up, it went to Windows, it installed Windows first try. I've updated loads of drivers, the PC is looking great. I have set the CPU to do a basic overclock that's not going to be overheating, but just gives it a little bit of extra boost, and it all runs absolutely fine. Yeah, apart from a couple of hiccups that we had during that installation, it wasn't too bad. We built a PC. It only took about four and a half hours. I appreciate you guys won't see that. This video will be much shorter, but it took about four and a half hours. I took my time with it to be careful. I hope you guys have found a bit of interest in this video. I hope that for Noah, Elliot, and Barry, if you watched this, you've enjoyed watching the PC come together. Anyone that's watched it in my community that hasn't built a PC, hopefully it's inspired you to maybe build a PC or take the plunge of upgrading your parts yourself. If anyone has any questions, let me know. But like I said, this is a completely one-off video. You're not going to see me creating more PCs, not on YouTube video anyway. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, give it a like and a comment. It really helps the YouTube algorithm to help promote the video. Although, to be fair, this is going to be a weird video to promote because it's not exactly what my channel is about. But check out the other videos as well if you want to see some interesting gaming about Dead by Daylight and the Coop Corner chat about, which is kind of a bit of a talk show. But anyway guys, see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Fowl Gaming. Goodbye.